Two men can share the same face, the same skin, the same rice fields, and the same monsoon rain, but their blood can carry two completely different stories. That is what scientists found when they looked closely at Bengali DNA on both sides of a border that did not exist 100 years ago. If you have ever wondered who you really are and where your blood actually comes from, stay with me until the end, because this story might change how you see your own family. For a long time, the story was simple. Bengalis are Bengalis. One language, one food, one river system feeding one culture. Whether you were born in Kolkata or in Dhaka, you were told the same thing growing up. Same roots, same ancestors, same blood. This idea felt natural. It felt obvious. The Bengali language connects millions of people. The songs are similar. The food is similar. Fish and rice on almost every plate. The same poets are quoted in both countries. Rabindranath Tagore is loved on both sides of the border. So why would anyone question where the blood comes from? For decades, that was the assumption. Indian Bengalis and Bangladeshi Bengalis were seen as one people who got split apart by a political line drawn in 1947 and then split again in 1971. Two nations, one identity, that was the belief. But then scientists started digging deeper, not into old books, not into old maps, into something much smaller, something invisible to the eye. They started looking into DNA, and what they found did not match the simple story everyone had grown up believing. Before we go further, I want you to picture something. Imagine your body is carrying a diary. Not a diary you wrote, a diary written by every person who came before you. Your parents, and their parents before them, going back thousands of years. This diary is written in a code your own cells carry, and it never lies. It cannot be edited by politics. It cannot be changed by religion. It cannot be rewritten by war. It just sits there, quietly, telling the truth long after everyone who lived that truth has died. Genetic scientists learned how to read parts of this diary. And when they turned to the pages belonging to Bengali people, something strange started to appear. The data did not show one single Bengali bloodline flowing evenly across the region. It showed patterns, layers. Some Bengali populations carried strong genetic links to ancient groups that had lived in the Eastern Hills for thousands of years, long before any kingdom, any empire, any religion arrived in the region. Other Bengali populations carried a heavier mix connected to migrations that came from the north and the west, much later in history. In simple words, not all Bengali blood tells the same origin story. This is where the mystery really begins. If you are enjoying uncovering this the way I am, do one small thing. Type the word blood in the comments, just that one word. I want to see how many of us are on this journey together before we go deeper. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. When researchers compared samples from Bengali populations in India with Bengali populations in Bangladesh, the differences were not just about who moved where in modern history. Some of these genetic patterns go back thousands of years, long before any border, long before any nation called India or Bangladesh existed at all. Some studies on South Asian populations suggest that Bengal was historically a region where different ancient groups met and mixed. Groups moving from the west, groups already settled in the east, and groups connected to populations further into Southeast Asia. Bengal sat at a crossroads. Rivers connected it to the sea. Land routes connected it to the mountains. It was never a closed box. It was always a meeting point. This means the Bengali identity we know today, the language, the culture, the food, the songs, may have grown from many different bloodlines, slowly blending together over a very long time. Not from one single ancestor, not from one single tribe. From many roots, tangled together like the branches of an old banyan tree, until you can no longer tell where one root ends and another begins. But then why does DNA in Bangladesh sometimes show different patterns compared to DNA in parts of West Bengal in India? This is the part that surprised many researchers. Some genetic studies suggest that Eastern Bengal, the region that is now Bangladesh, shows slightly different ancestral signals compared to parts of Western Bengal in India. The differences are not massive. They are not about one group being more pure or more ancient than the other. That kind of thinking is dangerous, and historically it has been used to hurt people. But the differences are real enough that scientists noticed a pattern worth studying. One theory researchers have discussed is migration history. Different waves of people moved into different parts of Bengal at different points in history. Some came earlier, some came later, some settled near the coast, some settled deep into the delta, surrounded by rivers that made travel difficult and isolation more common. Isolation matters in genetics. When a group of people stays separated for a long time, even if only partly separated, their genetic pattern slowly starts to shift compared to a group that mixed more with outsiders. Bengal's geography made this kind of slow separation very possible. The land is cut by countless rivers. Some villages, even 50 years ago, were nearly impossible to reach except by boat. When people cannot easily travel and marry outside their village or their region for generations, small genetic differences build up over time, not because of religion, not because of politics, because of rivers, distance, and time. This is one of the theories researchers point to when they try to explain some of these regional differences within Bengali populations. But there's another layer to this story, a layer connected to something much more emotional than migration maps: partition. In 1947, a line was drawn across Bengal. Families were split overnight. Neighbors who had lived beside each other for generations suddenly found themselves living in two different countries. Millions of people crossed that new border in both directions. Hindus moving west into India, Muslims moving east into what was then called East Pakistan. This wasn't just a political event. It was one of the most painful human movements in modern history. Families broke apart. Some lost everything they owned. Some lost people they loved. Some never saw their childhood homes again. Genetically, this kind of mass movement of people can leave a mark too. When large groups suddenly move and settle in new areas, and then marry within their new communities for generations, it can slightly shift the genetic pattern of a region over time. Some researchers believe part of what we see in modern Bengali DNA studies reflects not just ancient history, but this much more recent and painful chapter as well. Think about that for a moment. The scars of partition may not only live in old family stories and yellowed photographs, they might live quietly inside our own cells too. If that thought just hit you the way it hit me, take a slow breath. We are not done yet. There's more to this story, and it goes even deeper than you might expect. So far, we have talked about ancient migration and about partition, but there is a third piece to this puzzle, and it is one that most people never think about at all: religion and marriage patterns. For a long time, in many parts of South Asia, families preferred marriages within their own community. Hindu families often preferred Hindu partners. Muslim families often preferred Muslim partners. This was not unique to Bengal. It happened across the subcontinent, but it does create an effect over long periods of time. When marriage stays largely within one religious community for many generations, small genetic differences between communities can slowly become more visible in scientific studies, even among people who share the same language, same region, and same food culture. This is one possible reason why some genetic studies find slightly different patterns between different religious communities within Bengali populations, even when those communities have lived side by side for centuries and consider themselves fully Bengali in culture and identity. It is important to say this clearly. Genetic difference does not mean cultural difference. A Bengali Hindu and a Bengali Muslim can share the exact same childhood memories, the exact same love for Hilsa fish curry, the exact same emotional connection to Tagore's songs, and still show some different genetic signals when scientists study their DNA closely. Culture and genetics are not the same story. They run side by side, but they are not identical twins. This is one of the most human parts of this entire mystery. It tells us that what makes someone Bengali was never really about blood alone. It was always about language, memory, food, music, and shared land. Somewhere along the way, many of us started confusing identity with biology, but this story shows us they are not the same thing. If someone in your life has ever questioned your identity based on where your family came from or what religion your ancestors followed, send them this video. Let the science speak for both of you. Now let's step back even further, because there is a bigger and older question hiding underneath all of this. Where did Bengali people originally come from? For centuries, this question has fascinated historians. Bengal does not have one clean origin story. It has fragments, old inscriptions, ancient trade records, stories passed through generations. Some historians believe early Bengali populations were shaped by groups that had lived in the eastern part of the subcontinent for thousands of years, long before recorded history began. Others believe migration from the north and west played a major role in shaping the region's population over time, especially through trade routes and river systems that connected Bengal to the rest of India. The truth, according to most researchers today, is probably not one simple answer. It is likely a mix, ancient local populations blending with newer arrivals over thousands of years, rivers acting like highways, allowing people, goods, ideas, and genes to travel in and out of the region for centuries. This is what makes Bengal so genetically interesting to scientists. It was never isolated. It was never sealed off from the rest of the world. It was always a place where different rivers of people met, mixed, and created something new. And this brings us to one of the most emotional parts of this entire story. If Bengali identity was built from so many different roots over thousands of years, then the modern argument over who is more authentically Bengali, Indian Bengalis or Bangladeshi Bengalis, starts to look very different. It starts to look almost meaningless from a scientific point of view, because the DNA does not show one pure Bengali bloodline sitting untouched somewhere, waiting to be claimed by one side or the other. It shows layers, It shows movement. It shows mixing. It shows a population shaped by rivers, migration, trade, war, religion, and love over thousands of years. In a strange way, the DNA tells a more unifying story than the modern border does. Let that sit with you for a second. We often think borders create identity, but in this case, the science suggests something almost the opposite. The border came much later. The blood, the mixing, the shared river systems, the shared ancestors, those came first, long before anyone in that region had ever heard the words India, Pakistan, or Bangladesh. If this is starting to change how you see the word Bengali, you are not the only one. Pause for a second and imagine explaining this to your grandparents. Would they be surprised? Or would they already suspect something like this deep down? Now here is something that makes this story even more powerful. Some genetic researchers studying South Asian populations have noted that Bengali groups, both in India and in Bangladesh, often show closer genetic connection to each other than either group shows to some other populations living further away within their own countries. In simple words, a Bengali person from Kolkata may, in some genetic studies, appear closer to a Bengali person from Dhaka than to someone from a completely different linguistic region within India itself. This detail alone breaks apart a lot of modern political assumptions. Borders were drawn in 1947 and again in 1971 based on religion and political decisions, not based on biology. But biology, in many ways, still remembers what came before those lines were drawn. This does not mean religion and nationality do not matter. Of course, they matter deeply to real people living real lives. Identity is not only genetics. It is memory, community, belief, and belonging. But science is showing us that under all these modern labels, there is an older, deeper layer of connection that political maps cannot fully erase. Think about what that means for millions of families who were separated during partition. Some of them still remember exact addresses of homes they were forced to leave behind. Some still carry keys to doors that do not exist anymore. Their bodies, their blood, their DNA still carry pieces of that shared history, even if their passports now say different countries. This is where the story stops being just about science and starts becoming something much more emotional. Because DNA cannot show you the taste of your grandmother's cooking. It cannot show you the sound of a lullaby sung in a village that no longer appears on modern maps. It cannot show you the pain in an old man's eyes when he talks about the home he was forced to leave as a child during partition. But it can show you something else. It can show you that no matter which side of the border your family ended up on, you are far more connected to the people on the other side than the modern world often lets you believe. If you have family stories from partition, or if your grandparents ever talked about leaving one side of Bengal for the other, I would love to know. Share their story in the comments, even in a single sentence. These stories deserve to be remembered, not forgotten. So where does this leave us? Scientists comparing Bengali DNA in India and Bangladesh did not find one single clean answer. They found something more complicated, and honestly, something more human. They found ancient roots mixing with newer arrivals. They found signs of migration shaped by rivers and geography. They found patterns possibly influenced by more recent history, like partition and marriage traditions within religious communities. And underneath all of that, they found a deep, old genetic connection linking Bengali people across the modern border. A connection older than any government, older than any war, older than any line drawn on a map. This is not a story about which side has purer blood. That kind of thinking has caused enormous pain throughout history, and science does not support it. This is a story about how complicated, how layered, and how deeply connected human identity really is. We like simple stories. One country, one people, one clean answer. But real history and real biology rarely work that way. They are messy. They are layered. They carry both beauty and pain inside the same strand of DNA. Maybe that is the real lesson hiding inside this whole mystery. Maybe the line between Indian Bengali and Bangladeshi Bengali was never really written in blood. Maybe it was only ever written on paper by people who were not thinking about rivers or ancient migrations or grandmothers separated by partition. They were thinking about power and borders and politics. But blood does not read maps. Blood remembers rivers. Blood remembers migration. Blood remembers marriage and mixing across thousands of years. And in a quiet scientific way, blood is still whispering an older story underneath every modern label we have placed on top of it. So the next time someone tells you that Bengali people on one side of the border are completely different from Bengali people on the other side, remember this. Somewhere inside their DNA and inside yours, there might be a shared river running far deeper than any border ever could. And maybe, just maybe, the real shock in this story is not how different Bengali DNA turned out to be. The real shock is how connected it still is, even after everything history tried to do to pull it apart. If this story moved something in you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who still remembers where their family truly came from.